Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M. This is Ukraine war, is it? Is it? This is just a random sidebar video that I'm going to do about geography. It was tagged on the end of a Ukraine war update extra video, and then I had a massive tangential wander through the long weeds of my mind. And so I've cut it off and turned it into a separate video. Make of this what you will, guys. It might or might not be interesting for you. Right, now I'm going to go on to my sort of random topic here. And this is the idea that, well, it reminded me, because I started reading books some time ago, but I've just got too busy and I really need to pick it up. And I was just finishing the chapter on Russia. This book is Prisoners of Geography, right? Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. 10 maps that tell you everything you need to know about global politics. This is how cool I am. So when I go on holiday and sit by the pool, honestly, I'm like Mr. Geek, and like that's one of my lowest brow books I've read. I did read this on a plane. In fact, I did take this on holiday with me. No, I didn't. I met goodness me, when I went to Moscow to have my stem cell treatment. So I had stem cell treatment. Some of you will know this. I had stem cell treatment in Moscow for my primary progressive multiple sclerosis. I had to get it done privately because they didn't do it on the NHS in the UK. They do it now in locally to me in Southampton, but my type of MS, I wouldn't qualify for it. Anyway, this was like the best treatment you can get. And as soon as I was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, I was like, what can I do to combat this, because there was no drug on the NHS at the time. There's now one drug on the NHS. So I did my research. You know me, I'm a bit of a geek. So did some research, found out about stem cell therapy, found out that Moscow actually had the best place in the world for it. They've been doing it since 1999, so 20 odd years, I think, treating the MS with it. And so I was like, I did the research on hospital. It's like the team is amazing. Dr. Fedorenko is just brilliant. And I was like, I've got to do this. But I was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis in August 2018. And then by March 2019, I was in for a month in a hospital in Moscow. I had to do loads of fundraising to do that because, you know, expensive. And I did that. And when I went to Moscow on the plane there was a woman reading this book who was married to a British guy, and he had bought it to her for her birthday. Anyway, random memory just popped back. So this book is about how geography dictates your outcomes as a country. Sounds pretty obvious, but in very deterministic ways. That we're like, you know, prisoners of geography, or as we're just about to hear from this thread, like heroes of geography. So in some ways, geography can constrain us and allow us as countries only to achieve certain amounts, or we're up against it. Think of like sub-Saharan Africa, or Saharan Africa, sorry, as like particularly difficult places in many ways to be successful, developed nation. You know, we can talk about like temperate climates having a real impact on success. We can talk about you know, northern hemisphere versus southern hemisphere. We can talk about east west versus north south. We can talk about all these kind of different ideas. Like, do you have rivers? Do you have coastline? Do you have natural resources? Do you have forests? Do you have mines? Do you have wind, etc., etc.? All these kind of things that lead to varying outcomes for any given country. And you know, it's really interesting looking at this chapter on Russia. Just the very end of the chapter, which I was obviously getting to, it says, at home, Russia is, and this was written before the invasion of Ukraine. At home, Russia is facing many challenges, not least of which is demographic. The sharp decline in population growth may have been arrested, but it remains a problem. The average lifespan for a Russian man is below 65, ranking Russia in the bottom half of the world's 193 UN member states, and there are now only 144 million Russians, excluding Crimea. From the general principality of Muscovy through Peter the Great, Stalin, and now Putin, each Russian leader has been confronted by the same problems. It doesn't matter if the ideology of those in control is Tsarist. communist or crony capitalist. The ports still freeze, and the northern European plain is still flat. Strip out the lines of nation states, and the map Ivan the Terrible confronted is the same one Vladimir Putin is faced with to this day. So there's still, like, Russia will still face the same challenges that Peter the Great. Interestingly, there are some theories that Russia is absolutely fine with burning through hydrocarbons and doesn't give a damn about global warming or climate change, because actually it will thaw the tundra in vast swathes of Russian land. Now, you think there might be climate catastrophes going on all over the place. You know, New York being underwater, Greece being on fire this summer to then being drenched and flooded, just insanely flooded. And then you had Libya, you had all these places. You know, Europe's been kind of crazy this last year in terms of climate. But Russia's looking at this going, we don't care. But this is just my speculation, by the way. But we don't care, because if our tundra warms and it's not frozen anymore, then do you know what we can do? We can plant crops there. And then suddenly you've got gazillions of hectares of arable farmland. And that is food, with growing populations in the world, that is food exports, and that is breadbasket of the world. So, Russia is already partly that anyway. Ukraine is, as we know. Ukraine and Russia are massive producers of crops, but global warming could aid Russia in that respect. So they don't really give two monkeys about this. Again, my speculation about global warming. But it's again, your outcome is linked to your geography, and not just linked, determined by. Now, that's a very long introduction to Michael Girdley here, and this isn't particularly to do with anything. Hey, let's have a sidebar, guys. We're going to have a little bit of interest. You can turn this off if you're not interested. But I think this is pretty cool. So here's a guy that's saying how great the US is. It's a funny thing, though, isn't it? So, our identities are intrinsically linked to our nation, our home nation. And we do funny things as well. So you might go, and this is just, I'm using the UK as an example, and whatever, just bear with me. I might go, oh, Britain's such a bloody brilliant country. It is absolutely awesome, Britain. And I'll be like arguing with people how great Britain is, how wonderful it is, because it's part of my identity. And I look at Britain and I almost say that, like, it's awesome, and I take responsibility for it being awesome, like as if I had some impact on the history of Britain. I've just been born. I'm an accident of history and geography, right? So I was born into the family I'd been born into, in a particular demographic, in a particular time, in a particular place, right? And I had no control over that. I didn't choose where I was born, when I was born, to whom I was born, right? And yet you kind of grow up and you say, hey, Britain's amazing and it's awesome, as if you've got some kind of causal link to it being awesome. Like, got nothing to do with Britain being, whether I believe it or not. And what happens is, our sense of identity also includes our nationality. And if you attack, say, so if I was to attack America, and this happens on my threads, I get people push back. I can attack a Republican leader, or I might attack a Democrat. I do it slightly less, but if I attack a Democrat leader, or if I attack America in some way, someone who's American is going to react to that. Someone who's Republican, someone who's Democrat. If I attack Musk, someone that loves Musk, it reacts badly to that. Why? Because they take part of that person or entity, like a nation, as part of their identity. So for me to attack that person is for me to attack, say, Elon Musk, is for me to attack Joe Bloggs over there, because Joe Bloggs loves Elon Musk, and Elon Musk becomes part of who he is, and the identities become mixed. I did a whole segment on this at the beginning of this war. interestingly, and we're revisiting it now a year later. But we need to be careful that when we're reacting really viscerally to criticism of another person, we must question why we're reacting in that way. Am I reacting in that way out of a rational reason, or is it because somehow my psyche is linked and my identity is linked to that person or that country, and I'm just reacting because someone's criticized that, and therefore it feels like they're criticizing me personally, and I take affront to that. We do that a lot with nationhood. So if someone criticizes the UK, Britain, I might be like, you want some? What's going on here? No, you can't do that. Rather than going, hang on, I am British, but let's have a think whether that criticism is warranted, and let's try and distance my identity from Britain as a whole, and then I might have a fairer understanding of what Britain is, right? So take, for example, history. We do this with history where like we look back with rose-tinted glasses on our own histories, because actually it's too difficult for many people to try and come to grips with awkward histories of our own countries, because those countries are part of our own identities. And so therefore, if you were to say, like, if I look back at British history and go, oh my goodness, the slave trade and how we're involved in the British Empire and exploiting other less fortunate nations than ourselves, or no, sorry, not less fortunate, less powerful nations than ourselves. We go around sticking flags in other countries and exploiting them, and and then taking slaves and selling them to the New World or whatever. And it all become, and then I look at Winston Churchill, who's seen as this great hero, and then I think, oh, the Bengal famine, and then the things he said about indigenous minorities, and like, oh, it's all really awkward. And because if that country is part of our identity, then by looking at that, the bad parts of our history, we are almost admitting there's a bad part of us. That's really difficult, and people don't like doing that because we have this core idea that we're all perfect and we're all brilliant. But you don't go through the day going, God, I'm such a flawed individual. Oh, I'm so flawed. Oh, nothing's black and white. It's all grey. And we just go, that's too difficult. So we're like, yeah, I'm awesome, and everything I do is awesome. And then when someone criticizes your country or someone you really rate, then that's playing around with your sense of awesomeness, and so you react to that. And that's kind of what we do. And I think it's interesting to start unpicking our own reactions to anything, and why do we react in any particular way. It's so important for critical thinking. Goodness me, I haven't even started this bloody thread yet. So Michael Girdley says, I consider moving out of the USA. After some research, I realised leaving is stupid. There is no chance the USA will stop being the global superpower and the best country for opportunity, and the reason surprises me. Okay. First, so this is not prisoners of geography. This is the opposite of this. This is like heroes of geography. First, the usual arguments for optimism about USA are democracy, the rule of law, the US dollars, aircraft carriers, the strongest military, immigration, entrepreneurial culture, and many more. But those are all the things that are not contingent on anything. Those are kind of abstract ideas that you can either have or not. You just choose to have those things, right? So yeah, that's why America's awesome. But actually, America's not awesome because of those reasons. America's awesome because of reasons that no one really has control over. And so therefore, if that's the case, then where does merit come? Oh, we could get onto like discussions for free will here, but like, does it merit being said how amazing it is? So imagine you were born. I used to give talks on free will, right? And I wrote a book on it. And you talk about like Ian Thorpe, the Australian swimmer. You're like, he's amazing. He's just the most amazing swimmer. He gets a gold medal, and you're like, hey, Ian Thorpe, yeah, Australia, Australia fair, and all that. And I was going to start singing it, but actually, he was born to have massive feet. He had the physique to be a swimmer. He had parents who were really conscientious, high aspiration parents that took him like to the swimming pool every morning for like 20 years or whatever. He had a high aspiration personality himself, and he was able to do delayed gratification that we know has a genetic biological base, right? So he was able to see the goal in the distance and work towards that, and be able to like delay that gratification, say I'm going to get that gold medal, but it's going to be hard work for like 15 years, blah blah blah. He was able to do that, and then we congratulate him, say well done, that's amazing. But actually, most of those things, that will arguably all of those things that were determining components in him succeeding were things kind of outside of his control. Well, that's the same thing going on here. So you can say how wonderful the US is, or any country. This is just the US. You can pick any country for how you analyze this. And you can say, yeah, the US is amazing, but actually it's not really responsible for its amazingness. It's just that is how geography works, and that's just the way that geography is played out in terms of affecting international politics and economics. So, but there's something more important than all of those: geography. A magical combination of geography favors the USA over all others. It's no surprise the USA keeps winning. The USA is the only economy to grow every decade for 150 years. Here is how the USA is so gifted. And you know it has done pretty well, right? So how is it so gifted? Well, the Mississippi River system, so the largest naturally navigable waterway in the world by far. You can sail from the Gulf of Mexico to Minnesota, and transportation by water is 10 to 30 times cheaper. So US goods get an unfair advantage. Inland places like Pittsburgh have clear ocean access. Right, next, prime farmland. The world's biggest contiguous prime farmland overlays our Mississippi River system, an unbeatable 1-2 punch. The USA can deliver more food cheaply to markets than any other. The USA exports 2 times more food than the number 2 country, Germany. Germany's there. 3, Great Lakes. But wait, there's more. The US has the largest freshwater lake system in the world. They are now all connected to the Mississippi at Chicago and to the Atlantic. Dozens of major inland US cities are virtual seaports. US goods, again, get a permanent advantage. And then you get number 4, barrier islands. The Mississippi connects with the unique barrier island system. This creates a virtual coastal river. So you have these islands that act as a barrier to the coast that then protect shipping around there and movement and protect the coastline in many ways. And it creates a virtual river, coastal river with calm navigable water from Texas to Rhode Island by more low-cost water transport. Again, American goods get to market cheaper. 5, size. The USA is the 4th largest country by area, big enough to have scale on a global market. So you can scale things up. You can make things more. You can make more of stuff to get the economies of scale. It's just like everything is bigger in America, as the saying goes, right? China, Russia, and Canada are bigger. The difference is the quality of the land. Much of Canada, Russia, and China are unproductive. This goes back to my point about China and climate change, is that could change, and that could give Russia a really significant advantage. Now, I don't know how productive that land is underneath the tundra as it melts, whether that's good quality land or not, I don't know. Number 6, energy reserves and production. The USA is gifted with domestic energy resources. Oil, the number 1 producer, and number 11 in reserves. Natural gas, number 1 producer, number 4 in reserves, plus wind and solar. Nearby and plentiful energy, American production is more effective. Again, natural ports, number 7. America has top tier natural harbors and ports on the world's 2 largest oceans, like New York City, Chesapeake, Puget Sound, LA, and San Francisco Bay, and they're well connected by road, rail, water to industry. This is huge, with 99% of international trade by volume done by ship. 8, large coastline. The coastline of the USA is 5 times larger than that of Africa. Part of this is because Africa has few inlets and large bays. The USA also has 3 times more coastline than Europe. More coast means controlling more ocean in your country's exclusive economic zones. The EU, although someone has put a added context to this, the EU alone has a coastline that is 3 times longer than the one in the USA. That doesn't include European nations that have an additional record coast line length like Norway and the UK. So it depends whether you mean EU or Europe there. So someone, but the general point is salient. Number 9, correct side of ocean currents. The USA the currents rotate perfectly for the US. US East Coast gets warm, moist air from the tropics, great for timber and agriculture. California croplands feed America with an ideal climate, despite San Diego being at the latitude of Egypt, right? It's an interesting point. And actually, those it's interesting how, again, prisoners of geography or heroes of geography, though the jet stream is really good for the UK. So we're on the same level as Canada, right? Canada is like minus 40 in the winter and it's completely frozen or whatever, and the UK is fairly temperate. We don't have that. You can grow certain sort of palm varieties in Scotland that survive over the winter. How the hell is that? Well, we get the Gulf Stream, and that warms up our entire nation, and that allows us to be far more productive than Canada. So it's a really important point that he's made there. The North, number 10, the North. Canada has bad geography if it wants to be a rival power. Its cold climate, kind of what I was talking about, means less productive agriculture. Much of the country was wiped clean by topsoil, by glaciers of topsoil, and few rivers. Due to mountain ranges, provinces trade more with the US than each other. Number 11, the South. Mexico won't ever rival the US. It has pockets of arable land in the middle, desert in the north, jungles in the south, and few good rivers or ports for transport. Then it has mountains and valleys that make integration difficult as a whole country. Number 12, oceans. Germany couldn't invade Britain across 15 miles of the English Channel in World War II. The Pacific Atlantic Oceans are massive, over 2,000-mile barriers against the USA ever worrying about an invasion. Did you know Red Dawn, where the US is invaded? Super dumb but sexy film. So, I mean, that's the remake. The original Red Dawn with, was it Patrick Swayze? Was... interesting concept. It is never going to happen. US just won't get invaded because there's a massive bleeding waterways in the way. So northern hemisphere, you want to be in the northern half of the planet. It has 2 times the landmass of the southern hemisphere. Bigger landmass means easier trade and competitiveness. Even today, most people flying between South America and Africa must connect through the north. Interesting. East-west. Does it matter if your country is north-south or east-west? You want your country and continent to be east-west. Crop types, animals, and ideas do best in certain climates. If you're north-south, you just jump bands to spread. Asia and North America are winners. Disclaimer, my day job is small business and tech entrepreneur. While I research this heavily, there are maybe errors. Even if I'm wrong on 1 or 2 and missed many more, I know why I'm never betting against or leaving the USA, which is too OP from geography alone. And my favorite quote about this is from Warren Buffett: "Never bet against America. He's 100% right." What do you think? I think absolutely. I'd agree. I mean, it's insanely important what your country's geography is as to what your outcomes are economically. If you look at so a great example is Norway, right? Norway has a sovereign wealth fund that is insanely good, and they made a different decision than the UK. The UK decided to open up to free market capitalism. I've talked about this a little bit before. And we said about the North Sea oil reserves, which are up here, we said to Shell and BP and whoever, yeah, go for it, go and do whatever you want, and yeah, we'll just tax you at the normal rates. You make however much money and whatever, and we'll have a little bit in tax. Whereas Norway said, those are our oil reserves there. So the same kind of oil reserves where they get half of them. But they said to their companies, yeah, if you want to drill there, then we're going to have a serious cut in that, and we're going to invest that in a sovereign wealth fund. So now they've got like gazillions of spondoolies in the sovereign wealth fund that is paying for their pensions, and it means that they have this advantage. And they've used it wisely. So, okay, you've got 2 nations that had that same advantage. One made a good decision, one made a less good decision, right? In my opinion. The point is that you compare Norway to, I don't know, Madagascar, right? And does Madagascar have those oil reserves? No. So can it pay like sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, blah, blah, blah? Not so easily. So we have geography enabling countries to succeed in ways that just decide, if you didn't have those natural resources, you have to create money out of what? Out of services. You have to be a mature economy to do that. How do you geography is so damned important in terms of success. Now, problem is for a lot of nations, I mean, it does help if you have sound political foundations as well, and democratic foundations. So you look at the US, and then it kind of finds its oil and gas reserves and develops a technology, and that is found in a place that already has fairly well established political foundations. But when you look at places like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, where oil is found, and then it kind of so many places in the world that have oil, huge oil reserves, are effectively like, monarchies, or basically dictatorships, or autocracies or theocracies, and that's not cool. So it does help when you have good political systems as well, which kind of doesn't necessarily depend on geography. Although I wonder whether you're more likely to get sound political systems. There's something in this, maybe, out of places that are more, I don't know, perhaps more temperate, perhaps more I don't know, successful in other ways because of their geography. So maybe a successful geography, or a decent geography, facilitates a sounder political system. I don't know if there's an interesting connection there. But anyway, I'll probably separate this segment off into a wholly separate video because I have banged on for way too long. So thank you. Let me know what you think. This is just a different sidebar for you. What does the country you live in, how is that constrained by its geography? So let me know if you're in a landlocked country and you are unable to do X or Y. Do you think that's a benefit? Do you think is it annoying that you don't have coastline? How about rivers? How about just full of mountains? How about deserts? These sort of things that define your success as a country, and you can measure success in obviously many different metrics. But let me know what you think about this. And when you've got somewhere like Russia potentially, could, and it has historically. I mean, it's got massive amounts of natural resources, but those natural resources haven't been discovered in the context of a sound political system, where they have in the US. So, you had the Tsar, and then you had the October Revolution and communism, and then you had communism going almost straight into crony capitalism, into like oligarchy and kleptocracy. So it's never, I wonder if Russia really could be a far more successful country if it had a fertile political ground, as much as fertile arable land. Anyway, that's me babbling on. Try and make sense of it if you can. Thank you for watching. Take care. Speak soon.